So my name is Omar Abasad. It is 4:29 p.m., May 25th, 2020. So I'm going to start by showing you the temperature. I'm just going to give you samples as usual of the targeting in my unit as part of the ongoing experiment. 37.3 underneath the left arm. 37.3. 37.3. 36.7. Plus I have nothing. 36.8. Sudden drop. 0.5, 0.6 degrees. 37.3. 37.2. 37.1. 37. 36.9. Right side. 37. 37. So temperature going up and down. Temperature right now is 75. Humidity is 58. This number here. Okay. So I'm going to take my blood pressure. And today I'm going to read you a complaint I filed with the Toronto police about the way I was arraigned when I was falsely charged. The charge was as a result of 2 Muslim women covered in the hijab or niqab, not sure which one it was, but anyway, the entire face was covered and the eyes just very slit, just like this, just the eyeballs. And I think the covering was not very clear either, so it was hard to see. So the pressure is a little bit high, 125/79. So I'll give you the last 3. So at 4:23, it was 116/72. 4:27, 123/71. And 4:32, it was 125/79. 77, 77, 78, pulse rate. Okay. So the power, that's the hand being tagged. So I was updated that the next step in the procurement and recruitment process. Keep in mind, I'm 60 years old, and still trying to be, and the criminals are still trying to procure and recruit and train. So I shield, and the shielding I use are quite effective. With experimentation, you can determine what kind of shielding is needed, when it's needed, because the power is turned up and down. And with each person who logs on, especially if you're being passed around, the person try to customize. There's also a lot of dream manipulation, because I find when the signals are high, I have nightmares. But the nightmares are not really nightmares. So the left hand is tagged at a higher power, if you look at this number here. So the nightmares are actually commented on outside the window. So that's how I know, one of the ways I know anyways, that my dream is being manipulated. They actually talk about it outside the window as an active part of experimentation. So today, like I said, I'm going to 76.5. I'm going to read how I was arraigned, why I was arraigned and charged. And I'm going to give you some points of the case that was not presented because the case was dismissed. And I tried to make some of these points to my lawyer, and he made it very difficult for me to talk to him because he would shut me down when I tried sending him emails explaining the background. Um, I got threats like keep harassing me. So if I sent him emails explaining the background, I was harassing him. When I insisted that he did things the way I wanted it, because this is what I was paying him for, he would make comments like keep harassing me. Then, of course, later on, I learned other things. So why he was doing that. So without more talking, let me just switch to the complaint I filed. So this was dated March 14th, 2017. The charge went through March 16th, 2016. So it took me a year to get my thoughts together enough to put this in because I was suffering, post-traumatic stress from all of this. So this was dated, again, March 14, 2017. And I'll just start reading here. So after making, and this is to the complaints department of the Toronto Police. So after making a 911 call early in the afternoon that day, which was March 16, 2016, about being harassed in a nearby mall by two Muslim women dressed head to toe in black, but only the eyes showing, and speaking to two officers who answered the call and attended the scene, the following happened. At about 6 p.m., I was taken from my home by two police officers, one male and one female. I was placed in handcuffs as I stepped out of my unit after a knock at the door. One officer asked to enter the unit, asking to speak to me. I stepped out saying we could speak in the corridor. She immediately pulled my hands behind my back, cuffed me and said, "You're under arrest." After being cuffed, I asked permission to enter my unit to get my shoes. The officer went through my bag, without asking, by the way, which was sitting on the sofa looking for ID, flinging out contents of my bag while looking for it. He took my keys and locked the door after me. I was taken to the cruiser and placed in the back seat, and my rights were read to me. I was taken to 42nd Division Police Station. I was having dinner, so I was eating. On the way, so there was rice, like I remember there was rice all over my mouth because I was in the middle of chewing, just put a mouthful in my mouth when there was knock on my door. On the way, the officer asked a few questions, one of which was, "What is my occupation?" To which I replied, "I am an accountant, a financial analyst." He then asked, "Do you mean a bookkeeper?" To which I said, "No, an accountant." He seemed to want to make conversation by making antagonistic comments. At the station, my belongings were taken, jewelry, etc., and I was videotaped while asked for ID and health issues. And I did tell them that I had a heart condition. I indicated that I had heart problems, but not taking medication. I was getting heart palpitations. So the same day in the morning, I was in the doctor's office complaining about of heart palpitations. One of the officers said that she anticipated my being released that night. I was taken to a room and told that the detectives wanted to ask a few questions. So this was a fully enclosed room, no windows. The door, there was a little peephole on the door with glass. And there was a small table and a chair, and that was it. So I was taken to a room and told that the detectives wanted to ask a few questions. Then I would sign a few documents and could go home afterwards. So they were going to release me on my own recognizance. I waited, but no documents were presented. At about 11 p.m., I asked why I was still there. Then I was told, so this was like 6 or 7. So I was put in the cell I think we waited outside the police station for a while. So I was put in the cell maybe about 8:30. So I was sitting here for 2.5 hours. At about 11 p.m., I asked why I was still there. Then I was told that the detective on the previous shift, so the shift changed, the people who put me there left, indicated that I was to remain in custody for a bail hearing the next day. So somewhere along the line, the decision was made to hold me for bail. No criminal record, no questioning. I asked why, since I understood I was gonna go home that night. The officer replied that he did not know why and that he was just following what was written on the documents left by the officer on the exiting shift. At about 12 a.m., I was taken to a cell. So the room I was in was a questioning room. And I was waiting to be questioned in the room, and it never happened. So I was moved when they decided to charge me, and I asked what charge, and they didn't tell me what charge. I'm sorry, there was a confusion as to what charge it was. I did ask what charge it was. At about 12 a.m., I was taken to a cell. I needed to go to the bathroom, and I asked the male officer in charge about privacy, since any officer, male or female, could enter the area anytime, and there was a camera directly in front of the cell. So, of course, you know the cell in TV shows, there is no barriers. It's just the door is not closed. It's bars, and there was a camera right in front of it, and the toilet was in front of the camera. So a camera directly in front of the cell, in front of the bars, as I just said. The cell contained the toilet and a steel cot. There were no coverings whatsoever on the steel cot, just steel. I was given a paper gown for privacy after asking about privacy issues. I understood that the male officer in charge was behind the surveillance camera. So I was being looked at by a male policeman while I was going to the bathroom. This was extremely degrading since all activities were being recorded, not only viewed live by a male officer. I assumed it was being recorded. I was told later on that the recordings, I think I was told by somebody later on, and this is purely from memory, that the videos, that the people weren't actually recorded by those surveillance camera. They were just for looking. So anyway, so let me just read what I wrote at that point in time. This was extremely degrading since all the activities were being recorded, not only viewed live by a male officer. I asked for a bottle of water and it came about 2 hours later. I was in shock from being taken out of my home this way, and my mouth was dry. At around 2 a.m., I was printed, my fingerprints, and returned to the cell. So I woke up around 6 o'clock that day. So at 2 a.m., I was still in the cell. And this was after waking up, going to the doctor in another city. It took me 2 hours to get and 2 hours back. And I was getting heart palpitations. And then I went to the grocery store right after. Then I came home and I cooked dinner, and I was having dinner. And then they came and they got me after these two people went home and called the cops and said I was harassing them. This was after I called 911 saying they were complaining that they were harassing me. So they did not question me before they pulled me out of my unit. At about 2 a.m., at around at 2 a.m., I was printed and returned to the cell. At about 2:30 a.m., two officers came in. I was searched, cuffed, put in a wagon to go to 55 Division, where I was told there was a woman's holding cell. On the way to this location, in the wagon, the heat was turned on. So the wagon was a small wagon, very, very, very dimly lit. The air was turned on, so the fan was going. It was all steel. It was a box, a steel box, dark steel box, completely enclosed, small, and claustrophobic. I was searched, cuffed, and put in a wagon to go to 55 Division, where I was told there was a woman's holding cell. On the way to this location in the wagon, the heat was turned on. I had a winter coat on, and it was a mild spring, evening. And they still had the heat on. My hands, of course, were cuffed behind my back. I was the only one in that section of the van. Apparently, there are two sections, one for males and one for females. After about 10 minutes, I became really hot. I said hello, and the female officer answered from the front of the van. I said, could you please turn off the heat? I had a heart problem and I can't breathe. Nothing happened. I pleaded for the heat to be turned off, but it never was. I then, in desperation to keep from getting asthmatic, a symptom of the heart condition, slid to the corner of the van where the heat was not coming directly into my face. After several pleadings to turn off the heat, so I knew they were hearing me because she answered, to which I got no reply. Again, in desperation, I wiggled one of my hands out of the cuff, because I have very small hands. I wiggled one of my hands out of the handcuff and slid the coat off one of my shoulders. I was so hot. I was so hot. That's not in the report. My hand became extremely sore and was sore for days afterwards because I wiggled it for quite a few minutes to get it out. This is how desperate I was. I actually slid my hands back into the cuffs in fear of being accused of trying to escape. So I'm not sure if the wiggling loosened. I don't know how the cuffs was put on, but my hands were very, very sore. My hands became extremely sore and was sore for days afterwards. I actually slid my hands back into the cuffs in fear of being accused of trying to escape after a lot of wiggling. I was in that much fear. Okay, so keep in mind that it was 2:30 in the morning. I'm on the road in the city of Toronto. The only two people who knew I was in that van were the driver and the officer that was in the seat beside the driver. It was a woman. I think it was a woman and a man. Yes, it was a woman and a man, because the woman answered me and the male was driving. Nobody knew I was there, because at the police station, before I got in the wagon, I was asked if I could speak to a lawyer. They got a lawyer for me, and the lawyer said, keep your mouth shut, don't answer anything. I wasn't questioned, so there was nothing to answer. Wow, just reading this. Just reading this is so upsetting. It's not, it's, okay. Let me just continue reading. I actually, There was a stop for a few minutes, and the door of the van clicked open and left open while the van was stopped. So obviously they heard my pleadings, but the heat was never turned off. The heat was never turned off. When the wagon started again, moving again, the heat was still on. I started feeling like I was going to pass out. I came really close, or I might have, I'm not sure. I was in the wagon for more than an hour. Well, it felt more than an hour. Later on, I think it was about an hour drive. The steel surface of the inside of the wagon reflected the heat, and it felt like a sauna, only there was no way out, and I was in there for more than an hour. When the wagon arrived at 55 Division, while being signed in, the officer asked if there was any changes while in transportation, to which I replied that it was hot in the van. I was in the cell in 55 Division for about 3 hours. The other inmates howled, cried, snored loudly. I had no sleep. In the morning, after being put into the wagon, I asked the female officer to ask the driver to turn off the heat in the wagon while in transportation. This was done on the way to the College Park to be arraigned to the court. This was on the way to court. At College Park, I was placed in the first holding cell for about an hour and a half. I was then transferred. And so this is after being patted down, put in handcuffs, and I think we were connected. I can't remember if they were connected or not. But anyways, we were patted down, and we were put back in cuffs, and then taken to this cell. So this holding cell contained women from Vanier Correctional Center. So let me just clarify this. When we arrived to College Park, which is where the court was, to wait for bail, we came out in cuffs, and we were searched, like right down to taking out shoes and everything. And then we were placed in a cell. And then we were in that cell for about an hour. And then we were taken from that cell into another cell closer to the court. So in the second cell, this is what happened. This holding cell contained women from Vanier Correctional Center, which was jail. One was pregnant, and a few were visibly drug addicts and prostitutes. There were people living off the streets. Most of them were. They were lying on the dirty concrete floor. Even the pregnant woman was. So in all these cells, there was one toilet, these rooms, these waiting rooms. There was one toilet for all the people in the room, and there was no barrier in the toilet. There was it was open. The wall came up to your waist, and everything was in full view. And so you had to go to the bathroom in full view of everybody in the room. So, and I had to go to the bathroom in the morning in the woman's cell before getting into the wagon to get to the court, in full view of the guard in that police station. So 2 police stations, I had to go to the bathroom in full view of the person who was behind the camera. But in the rooms where there was no privacy, I didn't go to the bathroom all day. So from about 6 o'clock, which is when we got from the women's holding cell to the court, I think it was 6 or 7, I did not go to the bathroom all day because I couldn't go to the bathroom in front of anybody. I just couldn't do it. So I didn't drink anything. The lunch was a cheese sandwich or salmon sandwich on white buns, and Kool-Aid, watered down Kool-Aid. So I didn't drink. I didn't drink any water. When I saw the toilet and you had to go to the bathroom in front of everybody, I stopped drinking. So my foot was swollen as well too, because I was standing most of the time. Anyway, so this was after being in the heat in the wagon for about an hour. So my body was heated up, and I was getting heart palpitations all the way. I was then transferred to another cell while waiting for the court hearing for bail. So this is cell number 2 in the court building. This holding cell contained women from Vania Correctional Center. One was pregnant and a few were visibly drug addicts and prostitutes. They were lying on the dirty concrete floor, even the pregnant woman. I think she was like maybe about 2-3 months along. There were between 10 to 15 people in an approximately 12 by 12 room. The concrete seating were meant for about 6, and there was one bench, concrete bench. The pregnant woman asked others for leftover food, since she would get hungry more often, and only 2 sandwiches were served for lunch and breakfast. The toilet offered no privacy. The women were defecating, urinating, and changing feminine protection in plain view of all the other women in the room. And there were lesbians in the room as well. They were visibly with each other, talking in an intimate way to each other. Toilet paper and feminine protection had to be asked for as needed. And yeah, some people used them to cover their faces while trying to sleep on the floor. So the women were covering their faces with feminine napkins. After about 4 hours in the room, some women started getting really upset. Really upset. Some of them went nuts and were having breakdowns, mental breakdowns. So it was very unsafe in the cell, because they could actually attack you, because they weren't really all there because of the stress they were going through, and maybe other conditions that they might have had too. So it was very, very unsafe. The cell was crowded and was very, very unsafe. After about 4 hours in the room, some women started getting really upset and started crying, shouting, and having anxiety attacks. I needed to go to the bathroom and could not bring myself to do it in front of all the others. So I held on to it until I got bail, which was about 3:30 in the afternoon. It was more like 4 o'clock, which would not have happened if my sister didn't show up. They would not have put me on bail. I felt like I was in a third world country being tortured. The conditions were so truly inhumane, and a complete and utter, and still is, a complete and utter shock to my system that this would happen in Canada. If it was a third world country, it would not have been surprising. I stood up most of the time. I was in the cell about 5 hours due to a heart condition, about 5 hours. Due to a heart condition, my feet were swollen, and the heat, of course, from the truck. My feet was swollen due to fluid backup in my system due to the regurgitation of blood into. So I have a valve issue into the system due to valvular issues. My feet were extremely sore, and I was getting dizzy by the time I was taken to court. So I was about to pass out, basically. And I laid down on the bench because I was so scared to be in the room. I edged towards the door, so just in case, something were to happen, I could bang on the door and somebody would come. So I was close to the door, but I guess I was about to collapse at that point. So I went over to the bench and lay down, and by that time, a lot of people were called for bail, or the room was fairly, it had thinned out. I think there were 2 or 3 people left. So I was one of the last ones. So I laid down on the bench. By the evening, the cell was less populated, so there was space on the bench. So there was no space during the day because it was so crowded. Which is why the people were lying on the floor. I was not sure if I passed out or not. Whether I passed out or I fell asleep, I'm not sure. About 3 p.m. in the afternoon, I was called for a bail hearing. This was after about 35 hours without sleep. So that was 6 to 6 to 6. So that's 24 hours. So 6 to 12, and then 12 to 4. So about 35 hours. This was about 35 hours without sleep, being held in 5 different cells, one of which was overcrowded with other prison inmates, a fire violation, and almost passing out after spending more than an hour in an overheated wagon, the insides of which was metal, which reflected the heat, so that the metal made it more hot, and completely enclosed and dark. Had I not gotten in bail, I would have been taken to Vanier Correctional Institute in Oakville to wait for a bail hearing, which probably would have taken days. All of this after almost passing out 3 times in the past 20 hours. I would have died, basically. I would have gotten a heart attack and died. I would have gotten a massive heart attack and died. I think I actually did get one while I was at my sister's. This should not have happened. Some questions that needed to be answered. Some questions that need to be answered. Why were charges laid without questioning? I could not identify the 2 people, so the officers had no way to question them on the scene. They had already left. I could not lay charges since I could not identify them. So because they were harassing me. They went home and called 911 saying I harassed them. The officers showed up at my door as a result of this call, and without questioning me, arrested me. So this is while the people at 42nd Division, the cops at 42nd Division knew that I was flagged because they were flagging me. And my brother had the receipt. And there were people, and I'm getting scanned on my chest right now. And there were people who were subcontracting for my brother, like Pad and Parvini. And there was a lot of Muslim people, because I think Pad was half Muslim. There was a lot of Muslim people subcontracting, and the 2 Muslim women who came after me in the mall were part of the subcontracting groups, which the cops knew, of course. Why were there so many moves in such a short space of time? I do not have a criminal record, why was I held for bail? Why were there no videos from the mall that would have backed up my claim? I had asked the officers to keep the videos or look for them. Why were they not asked for and preserved? Well, I heard afterwards that they were asked for, but they never got them. Why was a wagon used for transportation instead of a cruiser, knowing that I had a heart condition, a heart issue? Why was the heat not turned off? I would like to speak to someone about preventing this type of occurrence in the future, both to myself and to other women, since I got the impression that some officers thought that I was a prostitute, which most certainly I am not, nor have I ever been one. Okay, so I got an answer to this, and of course, the cops investigate themselves. So you could take a wild guess as to what the reply was. Nothing wrong was done. So the court case, I wanted to go to trial with it. and I insisted on a trial. And that didn't happen. But while I was, my sister came and took me out on bail. 4 months later, I got myself off bail and put myself on my own recognizance. And while I was on my own recognizance, waiting for a trial date, because I insisted on having a trial, I found a job and I was working. So obviously there was no mental illness. So here are some points, which I think I made already, but I'll repeat. So I was at the doctor's that morning complaining about heart palpitations due to the first run-in with these two women. I didn't know they were the same people, by the way, because their faces were covered. I don't know. I didn't know who they are. I still don't know who they are. I've never seen their faces. Up to today, I cannot identify them. So there were two run-ins. The first one was in the same mall, in the one mall. There were two grocery stores. There was a Metro, and there was the Metro and Price Choppers. The first run-in took place at Metro. I did not call the cops then. At that run-in, they called me Sir Mad's whore and said Khaled could see Sir Mad's whore, and they harassed me as somebody who's mentally ill and so on. So, and yes, I walked away really upset. So, so I guess I was when I came home and I thought about it, I started getting heart palpitations and getting all stressed out about it because I knew it was connected to the person who had this receipt. And also it could have been connected to the Muslim steward who I took to court, the Human Rights Tribunal, and there could be some retaliation. So I was worrying about the fact that this man who I took to court was retaliating and was sending people of Muslim faith after me. So anyway, I had gone to the doctor the day the charge was laid, and asked and told the doctor about the heart palpitations. And then when I went back to the mall after that doctor's appointment, I was in Price Choppers, and I heard somebody talking really, really loudly. And I looked it up and I saw two women dressed again in black. Again, like I said, I had not a clue that these were the same two people. Anyway, I looked up and I saw the two black dresses, and I was in the same area. I was not following them around the store. I kept my distance. Then I went to the fruit section, and I was a good, I don't know, 10 feet away from them. And one of the women shouted, "Get out the store and go to the gym." 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. I ignored it. And I kept walking because I needed to go that way to get to the checkout. And I was planning to pick up some fruits, but this was in the fruit section. And she kept coming at me, "Get out the store, get out the store, get out the store." So I turned around and I said, "Excuse me, are you talking to me? Get out the store and go to the gym." At which point, one of the Price Choppers employee came up and said, "I heard that. She just called you a prostitute." So what he said was, he heard me calling them a prostitute. Keep in mind that these are people who are dressed in black head to toe, couldn't see the eyes. Of course, nobody in their right mind would think that they're prostitutes, and they would be just the opposite of prostitutes. So the Price Chopper employee pushed himself into the scene. And when he started accusing me, I started really getting upset, and I was getting like huge heart palpitations, at which point I called 911. Because now it felt like the Price Chopper employees was also trying to get me out of the store. And I was really being harassed. None of this went to court because I never got to tell my side of the story. Okay. So, so it is verifiable, this is point number 2, that the 2 Sharia women with their faces covered were in a different store in which they stalked and harassed me 1 week before. So the charge was following these 2 people place to place, implying that I was stalking them. It was in one mall. So if any stalking were taking place, it would have been within the mall. So it wasn't place to place. But no stalking ever took place because there were 2 incidents and not 3. The first incident happened in a separate store 1 week apart. The 2 incidents happened 1 week apart. So there was no stalking. If your paths cross in the same store, definitely you're not stalking. But they were stalking me because they were subcontracting under the contract that the Toronto police have on me, which the Toronto police, of course, knew in 42nd Division. When they came to talk to me, there was a Chinese officer and a white officer. They knew me because I'm a target. They knew me. And because also the person who had the contract on me in this building, Gord, they were passing me around. They were subcontracting to Chinese people, as it's being done right now, before. So they knew me. So why did they charge me? To cover what was being done. So these 2 women were, it could be verified by the method of payment because it was paid via a card. I'm not sure which card, but a card. And they were standing in front of me in the checkout. So it's verifiable, time, date, place. And I was there too. That our paths crossed in that store 1 week apart. And there was no second time at Metro. There was only one time. The second time our paths crossed was when they came after me at Price Choppers, which was at the other end of the mall. There was no following. I never followed anybody. And I would not have followed them because I was getting heart palpitations. Just like when I get heart palpitations here, I play music. If there are a lot of harassment outside the window, I play music, I tweet about it. Sometimes I leave. Before COVID-19, I would leave my unit and go for a walk. It's avoidance. The first reaction is avoidance. And because they harassed me the first time and they were dressed in black, and these people most likely would have been married. The second time, the possibility would have occurred to me that it could have been the same people, and they were women and they were married, and the husbands could have come after me. There could be gangs. There could be anything. I wouldn't know. There could be terrorists. I would be avoiding them. I wouldn't be following them around. I had no idea that the second time that the two people dressed in black were the same people. I did not have a clue. So given that I had called 911 before, why was I charged? And I told the officers that they were talking about Surmat and Khalid the week before. So there was a connection between Surmat and Khalid and these two people who were police informants. Surmat and Khalid were police informants. And they were connected to the Muslim steward who I took to court for sexual harassment and who did not disclose that he had espoused me. I heard he espoused me and he had to divorce me. And he was a steward. He did not disclose this in court. So that was obstruction of justice. And he lied because I asked the question straight out and he denied it. So he out and out lied in court. So layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of crimes being committed by people who are appearing in court, by lawyers who are lying to me, misrepresenting me, judges who take advantage. When I signed that this case was dismissed, and they wanted to have a peace order because the lawyer just flat out almost refused to go to trial, basically. Started swearing when I insisted that we go to trial. Effing something blankety blank. And at that point, I had waited a year already. So I had waited a year for the trial date. And then if he was going to pull out of the case, and I would have to wait, this would have gone on for 3-4 years, just waiting. So I decided to go for the peace order because I was pretty much coerced into doing it. But I refused to sign it for any conditions, restricting conditions. I out and out refused. So the only condition that you can get me to sign was to stay away from the mall. There was nothing about weapons. There was absolutely nothing about anything else. Staying away from these people, there was nothing like that. First of all, I don't know who they are. I can't identify them. So this order meant crap. It was crap, utter crap. I mean, even staying away from the mall, there'd be other people who are dressed this way. And I wouldn't know who they were. I meet people dressed this way all the time in the street. And there is never a problem. There is no harassment and there is no stalking. So what would staying away from the mall do? Who would it protect? Absolutely nobody. I walk the street and there are people dressed in black all the time. There are people dressed in black in this building. So how is an order that says one statement, stay away from the mall, serve any purpose? It doesn't serve anything other than to say that there is a peace order, which makes me look guilty. It artificially criminalizes me. And it compromises me if I'm for being set up and framed a second time in the similar fashion. So the next time there's going to be no bail. And this is exactly what is happening right now. Outside the window, the perpetrators are saying, this time no bail, this time no bail. She's been charged once before. And if you go to court, that's all that's going to be said. There's a charge. And that's all that's going to be discussed in court when the judge looks at it. And this time, no bail. And of course, holding you for bail, and they're going to kill you, basically, because they almost killed me the first time. So this time, I'm not coming back. And this is where it's headed right now. So no criminal background. And my brother was holding the receipt, and a Muslim person was subcontracting under that receipt, and Muslim people were subcontracting under that receipt. My brother never disclosed to me that he had a contract on me. The cops never disclosed to me that they had a contract on me. Nobody in 25 Bamberg Circle in Toronto ever disclosed to me that they were monitoring me on behalf of the Toronto police because they had flagged me based on suspicions. Nobody ever disclosed this. And I'm reporting to the Toronto police for years that I'm being stalked and harassed, and I'm being abused by certain people in this building and in the workplaces where there are also subcontractors who are working with the person who has the receipt from this building. So it started, the flag started in this building. Somebody in this building flagged me. Two names come up, Gord and Tang. And I heard my name was in the newspaper. So of course, 42nd Division knows all of this. Everybody in 42nd Division knows all of this. So why no questioning? And this was the other side of the story. Had they questioned me, this is what they would have heard. And of course, the contract is all the explanation I need. And once the connection is made between the contract and the surveillance and the subcontractors, what's on your cell phone can be requested in the court because they would have been stalking me and tracking me to gather information for the person with the receipt. But of course, the lawyer was a subcontractor and a renter. So he didn't want this to be discussed in court. This was a frame and a setup. So, okay, so it's going on an hour. So here is a temperature, 78.8. So my back and my neck was being pulsed. And I just got a heart palpitation, so I'm going to take my blood pressure. So yeah, so the pressure went up. 125/88. So I suspect that I was being pulsed in the cell because my feet were very swollen. And I was just bloated when I was at my sister's. And I suspect I was also being pulsed at my sister's as well, out in Brampton, because I was also stalked in Brampton. I heard that the contract went to Peel Region. The Peel police had the contract. And of course, when you're in Dale, then the information is on the database. And being on bail was the most stressful thing that I've ever gone through in my entire life. It was the most stressful period of my life. Not because I was in fear, there was a fear of my breaking the conditions of the bail or whatever. it was just the idea of being on bail. It was so far removed from my reality. I, you know, not in 10 lifetimes would I have thought that I would be falsely charged and held for bail and almost lose my life in the process in Toronto, in Canada, and have such a gross miscarriage of justice being perpetrated against me. And I still didn't know the real reason at that point. It was after I was made aware. I had to be made aware by increasing the power and focusing these directed energy beams between my legs in a more overt way that I could not deny. If I had any doubts, I could not deny that something was going on. I had to be made aware, and that happened in 2016 when I became aware that there was penetration of the body, that not only stimulation, this was not subtle stimulation. Now in retrospect, I'm realizing that there was subtle stimulation that stimulated you to act out while you're sleeping. This was stimulation. This was a fine tuning of the technology that was used to imitate the act of sex. You can actually feel your muscle moving. Haptic technology, ultrasonic technology, and maybe other technologies that I'm not aware of. It's such refined, it was in such a refined state at this point in time that it imitates the act of sex. The only thing is it heats up the body, it increases your blood pressure, it increases your heart rate. And there's always, now I'm realizing it. I didn't know back then. In 2016, I didn't have a clue. It's now that I'm realizing that all these physiological factors can be measured to demonstrate that you are being acted upon. So you can well imagine, I mean, this was 35 hours, not even 35 hours. This was 22, 23 hours in police custody. And I went through all of that in 23 hours. So the police could come and take you out of the home. And imagine COVID-19, when you have this extra layer of laws and rules where the police can come and pull you out of your home if you test positive and take you away for 14 days. And you're under police protection, under police surveillance, monitoring. And nobody could get to you. It's like the older people in the old age homes when nobody could visit them. Why did they die so quickly? So it's becoming, I mean, when you get to the point where the police can come to your door and take you away and try to kill you, basically, in that wagon, that was attempted murder, because the people who were driving that wagon knew I was a target. The whole police force knows whose name are on these lists. It's in the database. And if in my case, I was being publicly harassed. So everybody knew, especially the Toronto Police Force. They knew 121/85. And the one before that was 129/84. So in the 1 hour then, I took the pressure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, 8 times. But let's start at 423. So 423, 116/72, 427 and 123/71, 432, 125/79, 523, 125/88, 524, 131/88, 528, 129/84, 529, 121/85. So the heart rate, obviously I've been sitting for the last hour, no activity. 77, 78, 71, 73, 80, 74, 73. Okay. If you can see that, not sure. Is that focused? So I heard an Indian family and a Muslim woman reported I was walking back and forth in the corridor. If I go out a couple of times, I would be walking back and forth in and out. If I go to the garbage, I'd be walking back and forth. I definitely don't go in the corridor and walk back and forth aimlessly. If I'm investigating something in the corridor, I'd be walking back and forth. Definitely, it wouldn't be for anybody to be looking at me or for just aimless walking. They're lying, just like the 2 Muslim women. They lied to cover what they were doing because they knew they can get away with it, and they knew that the cops were part of it, and the cops would go along with it because the cops were running the program. That's why they did it. Talk to you another time.